Well, I've played in a lot of big bands, for better or worse, and starting with Woody Herman around '78, and I've been, all through high school, junior high, and college. In fact, when I was in college, there was a guy named Tom Kubis, who I think a lot of band directors probably know because I think he writes a lot of
Yeah, he does.
music for a lot of different levels of big bands. And he and I have just really reconnected after 40 years a couple weeks ago. And he's sending me stuff to record here at home all the time, which is really kind of a treat just to reconnect with him. Very talented guy. So, so right after I graduated, I got called to go out with Woody Herman's band, and I did that for a year. Um, I'm from California, so when we finally came back around to California, I our last gig was about a mile from my parents' house, so I said, I left that band. But I was away from home for a year, as you probably all know. You go wherever that gig where you audition is, and then you don't know if you're going to come home in a day or a month or what. So I didn't go home for a year. So I was ready to put an end to that chapter of my musical life. And then I was
Was
started
that
playing.
with John Riley mostly,
Yeah,
Jay, on
yeah.
drums?
hmm
Yeah.
With John, and John left after about 5 months, and Woody went through about 5 or 6 drummers in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then we had a European tour, and he asked John to come back, and he
Oh,
did. And John and I still are good friends. We both teach at the Manhattan School of Music, where I know Scott from, and uh, I've been teaching there over 20 years, I guess. And so anyway, then I started playing with Toshiko Akiyoshi and Lou Tobaccon's band, and I did that for many many years. And that kind of gave me on. They eventually moved to New York, and I was toying with the idea of moving to New York because I was also playing with Red Rodney and Ira Sullivan, who were more of a New York-based band. And so I moved to New York and continued to play with Toshiko. And around that time is when I met Glenn. And I don't know if I'm exactly right, Glenn, but when we played with Bob Belden together.
yeah.
Is
Well, I
that
did some subbing on Toshiko too, and I think
that's right? Yeah.
trying to remember if you were on there at that time. Probably, but definitely with Belden. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know Bob Belden. He's no longer with us either. He passed away maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago, Glenn. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah. About 10.
But he was just a freakishly talented guy. He was an amazing tenor player, kind of out of would you say, kind of a Wayne Shorter mold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Never ever practiced ever. And actually my last gig with Woody Herman was his first gig, so that's where I met Bob. And he was in New York, and he started a band that was not a big band, but it was kind of a large ensemble, I guess. Like, was it 10 pieces, Glenn, or
12 horns,
12 horns?
3 rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Jeff Hirschfield, the drummer, and Mark Copeland was the piano player, and there was French horn and tuba. It was really a fun group to play with, and his music was fantastic. And then he got a record deal with Blue Note, and I did about 3 of those records with him that were pretty. Did you do those, Glenn?
I did the Sting, and I think that was the only one. The music of Sting. Yeah.
Okay. And he did one, the music of Prince, and he did the Puccini opera Turandot.
Oh yeah, I did that one too.
Yeah, yeah. And then he did another one called Black Dahlia, I think. I was not part of that. But Bob actually became an executive at Blue Note, and he did all these records. And to be honest, of all the records I did with him, I thought that one we did, Glenn, Treasure Island, is one of my favorite records I've ever done. It's really a great record. If you
Yes.
haven't heard it, I don't know if it's even available, but it's really good. Great, as I said, Jeff Hirschfield, Mark Copeland, and Glenn, and
Mike Migliori.
yeah, right, Megs.
and Tim Reese was on there, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah.
Jim Powell, and
Right. Right. So then I kind of, like a few years later, I started playing with Bob Mintzer's band, a big band. And we didn't have tons of gigs, but we would play at what was then called Sweet Basil or Sweet Rhythm. And I think I played on maybe 10 of his records. I'm talking about the recording with him because it was kind of unique. Then anyway, then I went to Europe quite a bit and played with this WDR band in Cologne, Germany. More recently, I've been playing on and off. I've been doing all the gigs, but the gigs are obviously for all of us pretty sporadic at this point. Fellow Ryan Truesdell, who does a Gil Evans project, and that's been super rewarding for me because, like everybody, I always loved Gil Evans, but it wasn't until I played in that band and sat in the recording studio and saw the instrumentation, and Frank Kimbrough was on that, and Lewis Nash played drums, and there would be two contrabassoons and a bassoon and four flutes and three French horns and a tenor violin, which I never even heard of, you know, and just this massive humanity in the studio. And sometimes it would break down into a 10-piece group or 38 pieces. And whatever it was, it sounded like Gil Evans, you know? And that's when I really got a deeper, I wouldn't say understanding, that wouldn't be so bold as to say I understood it, but just a deeper appreciation for his writing skills. And Ryan is probably among the world's leading experts on Gil's music. So he would explain things about why does he have two French horns blasting during the bass solo? He why softly, and I think Gil liked to hear the struggle of the horns. He would write with things like that in mind. And so anyway, that was an incredible experience, and it still is. And then I'm kind of saving, I don't want to say the best for last, but I've played with Maria Schneider for 25 years. I played with her for a while, and then I quit stupidly because I had just gotten married and I didn't want to. Remember, we played at Vigione's, Glenn.
Oh yeah.
And it was like a Monday night gig for $30, and I had moved upstate, and I just didn't want to play in a big band. But then she had a lot of success, and I wanted to play her music. So and she actually asked me to come back, I guess about 20 years ago or something. And so that's been a playing with Maria and all of those players, which included Frank Kimbrough, couple great drummers. Jonathan Blake does it now. Clarence Penn did it before that. Great saxophone players: Donnie McCaslin, Rich Perry, Scott Robinson, Dave Pietro, Steve Wilson. Great trombone. Everybody in the band is fantastic, and playing her music has really been one of the highlights of my musical life. People say, "Oh, why do you want to play in a big band?" I don't even think of that as a big band. I just think of that as her music that has the instrumentation of a big band. And it's the role of my role in her band. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but most of that band has been doing it a long time, and so she has ended up and Ben Monder plays guitar. Didn't want to leave Ben out. And she ends up kind of writing with the musical personalities in mind, and so it's interesting because people also ask me, "Oh, that music must be super hard," and it actually, for the bass, it isn't hard as far as executing material. She has this artist share website where she um, sells her her charts and her music, and of course, being the instrumentation of a big band, a lot of high school and college people buy her charts and play them. And so she wanted to have uh, interviews with everything in the band about this last record we did called Data Lords. And if we had any suggestions, like if a band director bought it, Jay, speak to the bass players. Tony Cadlick, could you talk to the lead trumpet players? Pietro, could you talk about doubling? Whatever, the role of the drums. And for I think all of the horn players, the music is really challenging, to execute those parts. And then when it got to me, I had all the music and I looked at it, and I found it kind of funny because it's really not. There's not a lot of written material. I think the hard part of that gig for a bass player is, I don't want to say making something of it because it's pretty well crafted. It's not that, but it is music that frames improvisation. I mean, the compositions and the writing is incredible, but it's also about playing with, when it breaks down into a quartet or whatever. um you have to be geared up for that, and a lot of her music doesn't have a lot of changes. Sometimes it's real pedally, like where I play a E flat pedal for 15 minutes, and it's like, how do you make something out of that? That's the hard part of that gig. It's not um playing a notey. It's not like playing, I don't know if you guys know Concord, the Gil Evans arrangement of the John Lewis tune that's on a Gil, I can't remember the name of the record right now, but I mean, that's hard, but Maria's music is hard conceptually for the bass, um, not playing the written material. I mean, you have to do that, you know. But so that's the tricky part of her playing her gig, I think. Mincer, who I think is somebody else that has written a lot for college and professional bands, but also college and high school, and maybe even some younger than that. But when you get a Bob Mincer chart, and I don't know who has played them, you probably have at some point, Glenn, I would guess.
Yep.
But like we all do, you get the chart and you kind of look at it. Where's their dense notes? Okay, I have to look at that. And Bob's music doesn't usually look like that. It looks at a glance pretty straightforward and easy. And it's not until you start playing it that you realize that the rhythms that don't look hard, but the way they work with the rest of the band, it's very the timing has to be perfect, and it is very tricky.
Mhm.
Not notey, but just rhythmically very intricate, and kind of subtly so, So
And are his bass parts pretty clear when he writes a bass part? Is it pretty clear what he wants you to
yeah,
play?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I heard what you were talking about with Kent, and that's that idea of charts being copied improperly or handwritten, like I heard Kent saying that just because it's uh, done with a computer doesn't mean it's easy to read. Some uh, like if the letters, as you were talking about, line up, or the rhythms are properly expressed. Um, who's that guy, Darcy?
Yeah.
Darcy, yeah. I mean, does a whole thing on it, and it's so important. And I have students all the time saying, man, I can't play this. Could you, and they'll put a part on the stand and it looks like some guy wrote it with a crayon, and I'm like, it's no wonder you can't read this. This is unacceptable. It's made about 80% harder because of the way it's copied, So I think that's, and Maria started off copying charts for Gil Evans. And then got Ryan Truesdell, the guy that I mentioned, the Gil Evans project. he did the same for Maria. So there's this lineage, you know, from Gil to Maria to Ryan. And they Maria and Ryan both are very meticulous about the parts, you know, and do they look right? The page turns, you know, sometimes I hadn't really seen this very often, but once in a while, Maria will have a chart where there's a blank page, but that's so that the pages can open like a book, you know, because you know, as a bass player, you never stop playing, you know. My wife came to hear us with Maria at the Jazz Standard a few years ago with a girlfriend of hers, you know. And my wife doesn't really know a lot about music, and her girlfriend knew even less, you know. And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, your husband sounded good, but he never really stops playing ever." You know? And I said, "Yeah, that's why I make the big bucks, you know."
Yeah.
But that's one of the difficulties of being a bass player in a big band is that very rarely do you get rest, and that's what really gives me agita. I'll get on the stage 10 minutes early just to get the music and the page turns all set, and that's like really almost the hardest part of Maria's gigs because some of them are, you know, 12 pages long. Uh, and I've also learned with her, she'll have a 12-page chart, but then I'll realize, man, you know, I don't need all this information, and I'll make my own part. It's like half of one page, you know, 'cause it's really more important to kind of be in the moment. And some of, I don't know if you guys have heard this Data Lords record, but some of it's pretty out there. It's not the, I don't know what, like the Americana kind of Maria that people are probably more familiar with. There's a lot of free playing, and she has me playing the bass with a stick and other stuff. And I just needed some cues to know kind of what to do when, you know, but it's not, again, it's not a lot of written material. So,
Well, what do your students see at Manhattan School when they bring in charts? Don't they bring in charts? You said some of this stuff's unreadable, but in general, are the parts written just with chord changes, or are there um, bass lines?
you mean what the students are bringing in?
Yeah, some of the
It's,
younger
to
students.
be honest, it's some pretty complex music a lot of times, you know. Um, I think not to sound old, but you know, their generation, the things that have influenced them, whether it's Ari Honig, you know, or uh, Ambrose or Brad Meldau. I mean, a couple of those guys are old now, but you know, I mean, a lot of the music is very odd meter centric, and it's funny because a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of my students, but many of them over the last 10 years maybe, um, I'll ask them to play a blues. You know, usually our lessons that are not the last year, but in large part, I grab a bass and they bring their bass and we play tunes together, you know, because for me, the things that are important from a bass player are, I can only check it out when we're playing, you know. Is it in tune, first and foremost? Is it in time? Um, are their ideas clear? You know, and that only comes from playing together. So when they bring these charts, we'll play a blues, and some of them, I mean, Scott probably remembers that to some degree. I won't ask him to comment on it, but you can if you want. But some of these people can really not play a cohesive bass line on a B flat blues that, you know, with voice leading, that really, you know, displays some sort of harmonic acuity, you know, or knowledge or the history of the instrument or the language of jazz, you know, whatever that means. And but they'll whip out a chart to something they're playing, and I'll say, "Well, play it for me." Well, here's a recording I did at a rehearsal with my combo, and they can do that, but they can't play a blues. And I know, you know, when people said that to me when I was 20 years old, I would think it sounded like a grumpy old guy, you know. And now I realize that that's what I have become. But you know, I mean, this music does have a legacy and history, and you know, what I say to them is, okay, you like Larry Grenadier, well, listen to the guys Larry Grenadier listens to, he's, checked out everybody, whether it's Henry Grimes or Jimmy Garrison or Paul Chambers or, uh, any number of people, So you have to kind of go back before you can move forward. And I just think, particularly as rhythm section players, um, and bass players specifically, because there's really a lot of responsibility. People just think we're, in the back of the stage drooling, but there's really, I feel like we're really kind of driving the bus, because we're the link rhythmically between the drummer and the band, and harmonically between the band and uh, the chordal instrument, and the direction of the music and the feeling of the music. And if in a big band, if the bass is out of tune, the band is out of tune, so that's like a non-starter for me. You have to know how to play in tune, and I won't get into all of that, but you have to. Somebody asked Dave Holland, well, how do you play so in tune? And he said, oh, I play out of tune, I just correct it before you can hear it. And on a bass, if your technique gets you really for lack of a better word, in the neighborhood, it's really just a matter of rolling your finger one way or the other to make it in tune, and if you don't hear that, it's going to be out of tune, so a bass player always has to be pretty present, what else can I address, Glenn?
Well, let me think. We were talking earlier in the drum session about the way parts are notated. Just on a basic swing chart, what kind of notation do you like? Do you like the Thad Jones type of charts, or do you like bassy stuff, or Nestico, or what about those particular arrangers?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because Thad, I played in not with Thad, but when Mel had the band, and this was 30 years ago or whatever. I used to play with it quite often when Dennis couldn't do it, and I stopped doing it because I had a bad experience. We played a gig somewhere, and they called Lester Left Town, that tune,
Mhm.
Square tune, and they had an arrangement by somebody.
Mike Crotty.
That's right. That's right. And so they called the arrangement. Jim McNeely was playing piano, and I pulled out, the book is about a foot thick. So I pulled out the chart and I put it on the stand. It's like a 4-page chart or whatever. And Mel counts it off or whatever. And about 30 seconds in, I could see how fast the chart was going by. And I realized I had pulled out 4 pages of what was probably like a 12-page chart. And the rest of it was buried in the book, and we're like at a concert, So fortunately, I knew and I know that tune in the original key. It has a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember this arrangement, Glenn, but it has interludes, and then it goes to about 3 different keys.
Oh.
So I'm playing, and I'm like, oh, okay, the form has ended. Oh, they're playing an interlude. I would kind of bullshit my way through that, and then, oh, now there's a new soloist. Oh, they seem to be in this key, and I would kind of eventually be cool. And then another interlude, and then another key, and then another interlude, and then it went back to the original key, and then McNeely was just laughing because he knew what had happened. He guessed quite quickly what the problem was. So we finished, and he said, "Man, you did a really great job considering you had no idea what was happening." So anyway, my point was going to be that I started playing with the Vanguard Orchestra about a year ago. I vowed never to do it again. And Riley kept busting my chops. Man, you got to do it. Come on, come on. So I did it. And I was glad I did. It was nice to play with, they're all my friends. 30 years ago, I was just meeting these guys, but John and Billy Drews and Rich Perry, dear friend, so I was friends with all those guys, and it was much more comfortable being in that uncomfortable situation again, where you can't see the music and the charts are long and you never stop playing. But Thad, I'm trying to think of tunes. but many of them, there's all these bass lines written, and you're like, well, I know rhythm changes. Do I really have to play this bass line? And you realize that if there's changes, you can just play. But if there's a written bass line, it's written that way for a reason, because every note of that bass line, uh, the other parts relate to those notes, so it's actually really important that you play that. And and um and if it's changes, it's, you can do what you want and whatever sounds right. And again, Thad, incredible composer and arranger, but he was a jazz musician, so it was still about the blowing. um so I found Gil to be very similar, with Ryan Truesdale's Gil Evans project. I think in a week at the Jazz Standard, I think we played something like 78 of his arrangements,
Wow.
from Claude Thornhill, which was the very beginning of his professional life, and you know better than I, but I think that was in the 40s.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know that music until I was playing it, and it's incredible music.
I know. And imagine that band out traveling around.
Oh
All
man,
those instruments playing all that stuff. Nobody's dancing. What the
yeah,
hell?
I heard that name, and I'm talking about like 10 years ago. I had heard of Claude Thornhill, and I thought of it as kind of a dance band, and it was more of a performance band, and they would play Charlie Parker tunes, um, and featuring singers and incredible arrangements, of the tunes of the day, and every once in a while Gil would have a couple originals in there. But again, the way he would express the chords was very unusual. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it would say something like,
Well, even Snowfall, that he had
yeah,
that hit with Snowfall.
yeah, exactly. But the way he would express a chord, it wasn't just C minor 7 5 5. It was like this over this, or uh, an odd way of doing. He would almost write more like Beethoven or something. The key, there were a lot of key signatures, and B sharps, and same thing. If there was a written material, that was to be played, and if there were chord changes, then you could play the changes. But I learned a lot playing that music, and there was one arrangement he had of Donna Lee. I don't know if you ever heard Gil's arrangement of that for the Claude Thornhill band. And for that, I mean, it's pretty fast, not breakneck tempo, but pretty fast. And the walking bass line on that was written out for the head. And I had Ryan do it slow, and I could see, okay, this does relate to the written, to what the horns were playing, but it wasn't something a bass player would play, like it just didn't lie on the bass,
Like a tuba part or something, huh?
something. So after a few times rehearsing it, I said, do I have to play this? And he said, no, do what you want. And it would have been better had I played what Gil had written, but it just didn't. Everything else felt right. Same thing with Thad. When you play those written bass lines, it felt right. It was not. There are other big band composers I could name who I won't, and you could just put the chart on the stand and know this does not lie well on this instrument. In trumpet players and trombone, I'm sure, Glenn, you can look at a part and know if it lies on your instrument in about 4 seconds, right?
Yeah, on my instrument. Yeah, not
Yeah.
yours.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, for bass, I think what a bass player is looking for, if you want something played, you write it out and you write all the rhythms correctly, and you want the chart to be laid out correctly, as you and Kent were talking about before, and just the norms for the genre, still applies to bass, but as the bass player, my function is very different playing a Claude Thornhill arrangement with Ryan as opposed to playing something of Maria's, so
Well, I was even gonna go further than that and ask you about some of the pop people that you've played with. And has that been mostly on electric, and how does that come about? I was looking on your website. I didn't know you had worked with a lot of those people.
well, it was all none of it was electric bass. Like every bass player, I guess, of my generation, I actually started on acoustic bass and kind of had to play electric bass. So when I was in high school, I bought an electric bass. And I don't think I ever practiced a total of an hour on the electric bass. I mean, I could kind of do it, but as far as slapping and other stuff, just not in my purview. It wasn't. I love to hear people do that. Loved it, but that's not something I really was interested in doing. And so um, how did I play? A friend of mine wrote some tunes for Celine Dion, so he asked me to be on the record to play acoustic bass on it.
Uh-huh.
And I did that. Never met the woman. I just put my bass parts down, and in a way, I find that uh, equally challenging, even more challenging than playing jazz. Jazz, I kind of
Right.
it's like I've been doing that a long time, but playing that kind of music, you really have to craft your part. Do I play an eighth note pickup to the next bar or a quarter note, or do I not play a pickup? What octave should I play this in? Just all that minutia that's really important. And what I have found is that by having played that, it makes me a better jazz player. And having played free music, playing an evening with four people where there wasn't a note of music and we just improvised for 3 sets, having listened to Lee Sklar play on a James Taylor record informed the way I do that, and the way everything to me ends up informing everything. The use of space in free music, trying to play more melodic, playing jazz, it all kind of eventually becomes the same thing in a way. You still, if you're playing acoustic bass, again, it has to be in time, it has to be in tune, and it has to serve the music. And if there were a bunch of students here, I would probably, one of my go-to questions is always like, well, why do people hire you?
Why do people hire you, Jay?
Oh, no, I asked them that.
Oh, okay.
And there's all, I get a lot of, because you play for cheap, or because you look good on the bandstand, or and then about 10 answers in, somebody will say, because you make them sound good. And I say, exactly. And it's easy to get caught up. I mean, there's a lot of people that can play a lot faster and higher and more impressive than me. That's not hard to find, but I do know how to make a band sound good. Usually, not complete success, but to me, that's the main thing, So, like I said, I find everything cross pollinates, and
And what about living in New York all these years and being in the music business? The importance of being dependable and on time, and
oh
things
yeah,
that a lot of musicians take for granted. And we both know a lot of people that we won't work with now because we can't depend on them to either do the part or be there on time or whatever it is.
yeah, man. I mean, I can think of a lot of people who are friends and who I love, and you guys probably know a lot of them, but I would never hire them, because well, I'm usually the one being hired. I'm not a leader very often, but man, I don't want the agita, I get to a gig early always. And if there's traffic, I kind of live in two places upstate New York where it's kind of in the country, and then on the 15th floor in Manhattan. So I'm looking at the weather. I'm watching a weather system come in. Oh, when I'm ready to leave for my gig, it's probably going to be raining. I better leave an extra half hour. What's the worst thing? I'm there early. I'm ready to hit with no anxiety.
Mhm.
So I always get to the gig early. It's one of my pet peeves. Why am I here early? Especially on the road. If they say, "Oh, the bus is leaving at 7 in the morning," and Glenn, you and I have done that together.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you kind of mosey down at 7:15. So I get there at 10 to 7, and uh, I get my seat on the bus or whatever it is, and it's out of respect for the other musicians too. Um, when we played with Belden, did you do that French concert that became a
Yeah.
record?
Yeah. La Cigale. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't mention names, but there was a person in that band that we were always waiting for, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably know who it was, Glenn.
Yep.
But good player, no problem with him as a person or anything. But I mean, I'm not saying 5 minutes late, like an hour. He was in bed and we were all on the bus ready to go, and that's just not acceptable. There's a lot of people that are on time that play great, so why bother with that? I
Yeah.
did want to say one more. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I did want to say you mentioned the rock people,
Mhm.
and we did it with Maria maybe 6 years ago or so. We did a tune with David Bowie, and he was a big fan of Maria and her music, and so he wanted to collaborate with her in something, and he didn't know what. And so they he had kind of an outline of a tune, and Maria went all in and was just wanted it to be amazing. And so we had some rehearsals just with Ben Monder, the guitar player, Donnie McCaslin, Ryan Keberly, the trombone player, and I think Kimbrough was there, and we were just kind of running ideas for this tune. And when it came down to it, Bowie was so nice, man. She was kind of freaking out, like uptight. Is he gonna like it? And is this? And he was like, Marie, it's cool. It's just music. If it was a plane crash, we'd all walk away. Don't worry about it. And the same thing in the studio. He had the kind of the mentality of a jazz musician and a very open-minded one. Um, totally cool with whatever happened. Uh, um, it wasn't like a slamming, it was very dark, and it went into kind of a free section in the middle. And I said to the producer, I said, look, if you want to carve up my part and do whatever you want with it, I understand. I won't take offense. And he said, thank you. And when it came out, they didn't do anything. They let, stuff we all played that I thought for sure they'd be like, nah, nice try, but we're gonna tighten this all up. But they were cool with it, and that's to me so great. And I said that at this tribute to Frank Kimbrough the other day, just to play music with people and to have trust. They have you there because they know that you're going to take care of business, and you're there because they trust you and know. And so when you have that trust factor, whether it's two people or 40, it all becomes the same thing in a way. And that's how I like to play music. Right now none of us are really doing a whole lot, but I'm doing stuff from home, adding bass to like a lot of Gary Dial. He and I just did a duo record that we just finished, and he's playing a keyboard with an acoustic piano sound that's kind of an amazing sound. And it's a lot of free and open music and rubato and a different process, but still all the same. It's got to be in tune, and if it's with a click, we didn't do a lot of that, but there were about 2 tunes out of 9 that we had to play with a click and stuff. And not to be giving away too much, but um, it felt like making music with somebody. And he and I have known each other for 40 years, about how long I've known you, I guess, Glenn. And we're best friends, and we have incredible trust. So
Yeah.
mm.
Well, we could open it up to a few questions if anybody wants to ask Jay a question. I think you can unmute yourself.
What's going on, Jay? Is my audio working?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's good to see you, Scott.
Oh man, great to see you. It's been a long time.
I know.
Man, how you hanging in? Are things good up there? Pandemic wise, work wise, is there anything happening at all?
Well, I actually the other day I looked at my calendar, and it seems like as far as playing live, I do about 2 things a month.
Yeah.
And most of them are a stream with no audience,
Yeah.
and that's pretty weird. And
Yeah.
but you're still making good music, and I've been doing a lot of this. I'm here now, and I have a studio at my house. It's not state of the art recording studio, but I have some stuff, and I really enjoy making music this way since it's all we have.
Yeah.
And I try to stay positive in that. It's a cliche, but everybody's in the same boat in the world, really. So it's not like you're reading a downbeat. Oh, why is this guy getting this gig and not me? It's like nobody's doing anything. So with that, there's almost peace of mind. It's maybe not peace of mind, but it's just kind of resignation. So I just try to move forward. And how about you? What are you doing?
Man, I'm still in Nashville. So there's really been nothing happening down here. I've been doing that Billy Ray Cyrus gig. This would be like my 5th year or so with him, and we haven't worked since about a year ago.
Wow.
Our last gig was in New Orleans for Mardi Gras last year, and they just texted this morning and think there might be some stuff going on in June, but it's completely at the mercy of, these shows are like,
Yeah, packed with millions.
Yeah, if they don't sell 20,000 tickets, they're not going to do it, So
Right.
It's like we're even more at the mercy maybe of the whole public health scenario than even
No, I'm
some
sorry
other
to
stuff.
hear that.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
have you run into a drummer down there, Josh Hunt in Nashville?
Yes, he's the man. He's
He was one of my
incredible.
students at U of I.
He's
Yeah.
so good.
Yes.
He's got all the best gigs too. So
Oh, really?
it's working out well for him. He's great.
Yeah, he's fun to play with.
Yeah.
Do you run into Rick Reed down there? Ricky Reed?
Man, I know the name. I'm having trouble placing it though.
He's a drummer. He lived in New York, kind of around when Glenn and I were playing more together.
Yeah. I may not know him. I've honestly, when I moved down here about a dozen years ago, I kind of getting to Nashville at that time was weird, especially for me at the time. I had to make money. So I kind of pulled the plug on some jazz stuff I was doing just to try to get out and do a little more stuff that was more accessible for me for profit, and I'm just now kind of sneaking back into the jazz world. So I've probably missed a lot of stuff even since I've been here. There's a lot of people I still don't know, but I'm trying to sneak back in there a little bit now. So
Cool.
practicing again. So
Are there some clubs in Nashville that have feature jazz, or?
there's a few. There's one that's only been here a few years called Rudy's Jazz Room, and yeah, they're doing. I mean, they're still shut down. I don't think they've had people in there in a year, but yeah, they do okay. You ought to make a road trip down here, Glenn.
Yeah, I should. I keep telling Josh I'm coming down.
Yeah, you should do it. Yeah, whenever they get back open, I'm sure they'll be anxious to get some.
It was on one of my CDs too. Playing some
really
complicated Thomas Chapin music. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Crazy stuff.
So, Scott,
anybody else want to ask Jay a question? Eric, you want to ask Jay a question? Emma? You could ask him what kind of pickup he uses, or what strings he likes, or anything like that if you want. What kind of gig bag do you use to get on an airplane?
I can't really think of anything right now.
Okay.
no problem. Is Scott still there? Maybe not.
Yeah, he's still here.
Oh, I wondered how do you guys know each other?
I lived in Richmond, Virginia during summers from college.
Okay.
And Glenn was playing a bunch at Bogart's,
Mm-hmm.
the back room at Bogart's in Richmond, Virginia. And I used to go down and listened to the Jazz Maniacs. And I sat in a few times. I was young and probably
Oh,
terrible,
okay.
but
Yeah, that was an amazing gig. We played there 10 years. It's the longest gig I ever had in my life. And it was like every Friday and Saturday for 5 years.
yeah.
And then it was every Saturday for a couple years, and then once a month for a couple years. But it was like nuts to just have the same gig every weekend and be
That
able
was
to
a
play
killer
jazz.
band. Yeah, that was great. So that was in the couple of years before I went to Manhattan School and met you, Jay. So
Okay.
I was even younger and more terrible than than when I got to New York.
What year did you graduate, Scott?
I didn't. I moved to New York 2001. So I literally moved in 3 weeks before September 11th, and
Oh,
we
okay.
did that year together. And then I took a cruise ship gig that summer, and a 10-week gig turned into 3 years, and I just never made it back. And I ended up going back to North Texas and finishing that master's degree in 05 and 06. So yeah, weird history, but
Everybody has an interesting story to tell, you know.
yeah,
Well, that's
right.
what every time Rory and I get together, he brings his tape recorder and we tell more stories. He's going to write a biography sometime, aren't you?
Yeah, someday we got a big collection.
Oh, there's your head. I couldn't see your head before. Oh, you have a,
He's
I-
in a virtual background there.
okay.
There you go. You look like you're bodiless.
Rory, you probably, the last time I saw you, and I don't think I even got to say hi to you. I had a rehearsal with Armin Danelian
Oh,
at the new school,
okay.
and our rehearsal went long, and you had to set up for your thing. So you know, the minute we finished, you were like moving chairs around. And
Oh,
I didn't want to interrupt you. You looked very focused on what you were doing.
sorry about that.
No, where are you? You look like you might be upstate somewhere.
Yeah, actually, Croton on Hudson.
Oh, okay.
And you're on my side of the river or the other side?
I'm on the other side. I'm in New Paltz.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a quick question that maybe would be interesting if some different students are going to listen to the recording. Because one thing that I always remember that was really striking was when you and Glenn and I, when we did Glenn's recording, and I brought in this piece called The Forest, which was like a Brazilian style tune. And mostly when I played that tune with jazz players, it sounded like jazz players trying to play Brazilian music, which is nice, it's fine. But I remember you guys played and it was like, whoa, they've really absorbed, they really know this thing stylistically. And I wonder if maybe students would be interested in sort of styles that weren't the styles that you started out playing, any tips about how you got really deep into them?
Definitely, man. I listen, I don't listen to music as much now as I should, but I used to listen to tons of music, I grew up playing classical music. I hate the word classical, but avant-garde, Elliott Carter or Charles Wernan or, contemporary classical music. And, I never had any delusions about being, Latin music. What does that mean? That's like 50 different things. I mean, even in Brazilian music, it's 40 different things,
Yeah.
So, I played with Eliana Elias for a while. So I learned a lot playing with her, but I love Brazilian music. So, I mean, I could listen to The Waters of March with Elise and Jobim every day and get chills. That's like one of my favorite pieces of music ever, one of the greatest arrangements ever. And people think, oh, Brazilian music, you go boom, 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 boom. And if you listen, the bass players are usually playing what sounds like half notes, but it's often in 2/4, so they're quarter notes. But they're just playing nice, cushy, I'll say half notes with maybe a little weight on the second note, just to kind of talk about it generically. And so yeah, man, and learning that about Brazilian music, like I was saying before, and has informed the way I play jazz. The older I get, the less I play. But maybe 10 years ago, I'll be so together. I won't even play.
Yeah, that's the idea eventually.
Whittle it down to nothing. You know?
You just gotta slow all the way down to one note. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, hey, Jay, thanks so much, man. Does anybody else have a quick question for Jay before we go? I see Mike's joined us.
Yeah.
Mike,
Love your playing, Jay.
Hey, well, thank you, man. Thank
Yeah,
you.
man.
Thank you.
So Jay's going to join me in a little bit and talk about some recording stuff. He mentioned he had a studio, and also Stockton, who has a record label in Dallas. And we're going to talk about a little bit about recording and software and whether it's worth putting out a record anymore and who buys music and why. And so tell your friends, we need tips.
I can babble on about any of that stuff. So
Yeah, I know. It's hard to figure out, isn't it? Right now, especially.
it is. But
Lori and I were talking earlier. It's like even if we could book a gig, we'd be booking gigs for 6 months from now. And who knows, even in 6 months, if people are going to want to come out, even if you have a gig. So, we're always like 6 months or a year behind when we're booking. So how do we ever catch up?
yeah, well, that's why recording is so more important than ever.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
So that's at 6:30, right, or something.
Yeah.
My time.
Yeah, that's right. 6:30 your time. Yep. Come on back on this same link and we'll see who's still here. I'll be
Great.
here, I know that. And by then I might have a beer in my hand. We'll see.
Okay.
That's the beauty of Zoom too. You can't drink at school, but All
Cool.
right.
So
Cool. Thanks, Jay.
my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, and
Yeah.
you all. And are you doing another one now, Glenn? Or
Yeah, Mike Camiff is coming on now to do a little trumpet class.
oh,
Master
okay.
class, and then tomorrow Mike's going to do an arranging and literature class for picking charts. He's done quite a lot of arrangements for Bellwin and Alfred Music for all levels from junior high up. So I play a lot of Mike's charts in with my band at Wesleyan because they're really well written, but they're not crazily difficult like some of the stuff you were talking about. And we need those kind of charts.
Definitely. Glenn, if I leave for a minute and come back, do
Yeah.
you let me in, or I mean,
You don't need to be let in. Yeah, you'll get right back in.
or should I just turn my screen off and just let it ride?
You can turn it off. Yeah, I'm going to stop recording now. Let me do that.